Fluoride science is corporate science. Fluoride science is DDT science. It's asbestos science. It's tobacco science. It's a racket.
In July of 2004, Christopher Bryson sat down and discussed the findings of his new book, The Fluoride Deception, with Paul Connett of the Fluoride Action Network. The Fluoride Deception was published by 7 Stories Press in May of 2004. The book is based on nearly 10 years of research by Bryson, an award-winning journalist and former producer at the BBC. In this interview, we asked Bryson to introduce us to some of the important individuals and institutions which have played a role in shaping public policy on the toxicity of fluoride and the purported safety of the controversial water fluoridation program.
In 1993, I was working at Rockefeller Center in New York as a radio producer for the BBC. And I got a call from London. There was a local water fluoridation battle in the north of England, in Leeds. And the producers, it was a daytime radio show. You and Yours was the name of the program. And the producer said, "Chris, what do you know about fluoride? What do the Yanks think about fluoride? Is there an American angle?" And it was a very, familiar request to me. Is there an American angle to the story? And I said, "Look, I don't know fluoride from a hole in the wall. I have no idea about fluoride, but let me make a few phone calls to see if I can't help you out." And my first call was to Ralph Nader in Washington. And I'm not sure why I called Ralph Nader, but look, it was a consumer issue. And Mr. Consumer, Ralph Nader, I thought, let's give him a call. And I got through, and he said, "Look, I don't know a great deal about water fluoridation, but I've never had terribly good feelings about it. Here are the names of a couple of scientists you ought to speak with." And he gave me the names of Dr. William Hersey, who then and now is a chemist at the Environmental Protection Agency, and Dr. Robert J. Carton. Bob Carton had been with EPA, but at that time was then over at the U.S. Army. And I went down to Washington and met with Dr. Hersey and Dr. Carton, and they explained to me that the safety standards for water fluoridation in this country are based on fraudulent science. Fluoride defenders will say there's 2 stories. There's the industrial story and there's the dental story, and ne'er the twain shall meet. It's not true. The stories are braided very tightly and very profoundly, and they're braided from the beginning. The very first suggestion that fluoride be added to public water supplies was made by a researcher, Gerald Cox, at the Mellon Institute in Pittsburgh. Cox became interested in fluoride because of the suggestion of Francis Frary. That's the letter I uncovered. Francis Frary is the director of the aluminum laboratory for the Aluminum Company of America. He is very concerned about fluoride pollution around aluminum plants. He's very concerned about what the fluoride is doing to the workers inside these aluminum plants. But his suggestion to Gerald Cox is to look at fluoride's dental effects. And it's upon the basis of that suggestion that Gerald Cox makes his proposal to add fluoride to public water supplies. Right at the very source of the stream, you find the aluminum industry. Cox's suggestion that we add fluoride to public water supplies needs to be understood for who was saying it and where he was saying it and what the track record of the Mellon Institute was. The Mellon Institute was a leading defender of asbestos for the asbestos industry. Today, industry are facing a tidal wave, a crippling tidal wave of lawsuits from people who have had their health damaged, who've been killed by asbestos. Well, for generations, the Mellon Institute produced research that said that mesothelioma was caused by something other than asbestos. That's how you have to understand the fluoride issue. Industry was concerned about fluoride pollution and about lawsuits of a similar magnitude for fluoride pollution. So it's no coincidence that the Mellon Institute makes the first suggestion that fluoride be added to public water supplies. It's quite astonishing, Paul, the degree to which environmentalists have not been educated about fluoride. I'm a reporter. I'm not a scientist or a doctor. I'm quoting documents. I'm citing lawsuits when I refer to fluoride as a major industrial air pollutant. In fact, the leading air pollutant in the aftermath of the Cold War. Those are not my words. That's not my opinion. That's a quantitative assessment by industry experts of the scale of the lawsuits that they were facing. The most notorious air pollution disaster in U.S. history was the Halloween air pollution incident in Donora, Pennsylvania, a mill town south of Pittsburgh, where a couple of dozen people and several thousand were injured because of effluents coming from a U.S. steel plant, which were trapped by a temperature inversion. In the aftermath of those deaths, a researcher, Philip Stadler, a chemist, Philip Stadler, investigated. He did blood analysis, and he measured high levels of fluoride in the blood of some of the injured and the deceased. He published that data along with data which found high levels of fluoride in vegetation and a lot of other circumstantial evidence indicating fluoride poisoning. Sadler published his research in Chemical and Engineering News, but the Public Health Service came in and said that fluoride wasn't responsible. It was a mixture of air pollutants and bad weather that had caused the disaster. Well, I uncovered a memo, Paul, a memo from the Aluminum Company of America in which they had secretly gotten blood from one of the deceased. And their measurements were almost exactly the same measurements that Philip Stadler found. Laundering fluoride's role in the Donora pollution incident is really emblematic for what has happened for the last half century and an accounting for why environmentalists don't know their own history. Donora jump-started the environmental movement, but environmentalists don't know that Donora was almost certainly caused by fluoride. The book looks very hard at the role of a key scientist, Dr. Harold Hodge, in the fluoride debate. Dr. Harold Hodge, for most of the Cold War, was the leading scientific defender of the safety of low doses of fluoride and the beneficial effects of water fluoridation.
Dr. Harold Hodge, a distinguished toxicologist on the Rochester team, has carefully investigated the safety of fluoridation.
Well, to put it very simply, fluoride is safe at 1 part per million.
No scientist's word was trusted more by the health establishment than Dr. Harold Hodge when it came to fluoride. He was a very senior figure and operated at the highest levels for almost all his
horribly wrong, and we have been led very far astray.
It took me 6 months to get the legs to recover from the ulcers. And if you see photos from then to now, you wouldn't know I was the same person. I looked sick, a real sickie.
You might get ulceration, you might get just a rash, or you may get breathing problems.
Stomach upsets, skin rashes, headaches.
It amazes me, absolutely amazes me. How has something which is basically like a very big scientific and medical mistake been carried out?
Aside from chlorination, for the past 50 years, our health authorities have been adding the chemical fluoride as the first public line of attack on tooth decay, with some experts claiming that fluoride is poisoning us and the research is being overlooked.
The safety standards for water fluoridation in this country are based on fraudulent science.
The claim of fraudulent science was boosted when a Harvard professor in the US came under investigation for burying the results when one of his students made a profound and terrifying discovery.
There's the possibility that is now being looked at in the United States that fluoride might have increased the prevalence of a rare type of bone cancer in young men or boys.
This bombshell raises questions here about the safety of mandatory water fluoridation and whether there's more at stake than just fighting tooth decay.
I believe it would kill me.
Geelong grandmother Elaine Valentine says she couldn't understand why she was able to lead a normal, healthy life in her hometown, but whenever she headed to Melbourne and drank the water, she'd come home a very sick woman.
I feel lousy and I get very lethargic, couldn't care less about anything. Very, very tired and very, very wheezy and just feel plain ill.
Dr. Philip Robertson says up to 200,000 Australians may be suffering from an intolerance to fluoride and not realise it, with symptoms ranging from headaches or indigestion to chronic arthritis.
If somebody's taking fluoride and they suspect there's a link between their symptoms, it's a matter of getting them off the fluoride and watching to see if there's an improvement.
In some people it could be fatal. If I'd continued, it could have killed me.
She's had to fork out hundreds of dollars for a reverse osmosis water filter, the only way to remove fluoride in the home, but says it's restored her health.
Symptoms went almost immediately.
Fluoridation in most water supplies involves putting in industrial waste, a waste from the phosphate fertilizer industry, into drinking water. And not only does it contain fluoride, but it contains traces of arsenic and heavy metals. So that in itself is pretty worrying.
Professor Mark Diesendorf from the Institute of Environmental Studies at the Uni of New South Wales says there's enough science to prove the case against fluoride, and we deserve the right to choose whether we have it in our water or not.
Even more frightening thing is that the health departments are not telling the truth about it. They are so committed to fluoridation that they are suppressing evidence of harm. Everyone has a right to be free from such exposures from what is essentially mass medication with an uncontrolled dose. So this is really a violation of ethics as well as a violation of people's health.
I'm Dr. Bill Osmondson. I'm a general and cosmetic dentist and have been a dentist for 30 years. Before that, I received a master's in public health in nutrition and health education. For the first 25 years of practice, I promoted water fluoridation aggressively. I thought I saw the benefits. It wasn't until I actually looked at the information myself and sat down and looked at the different government agencies and the different reports and the studies that I began to realize that fluoridation was a problem. One of the first things I did is I looked at my tube of toothpaste. It says drug facts. I know it's a drug. If I were to give it to you, it'd have to be a prescription. That's for swallowing. When it comes to toothpaste, it also says don't swallow. And if you do swallow, contact a poison control center. Well, the amount of fluoride that they're talking about is a pea-sized amount of fluoride. You probably don't see that in advertisements, a pea-sized amount of fluoride. Usually when I see an advertisement, it looks more like a Dairy Queen ice cream cone. That amount is 1/4 milligram of fluoride. Well, that's the same amount of fluoride as what we find in 8 ounces of water. 1/4 milligram of fluoride, 1/4 milligram of fluoride. Don't swallow. If you do, call the Poison Control Center. One of the things that concerns me is water fluoridation for infants. The American Dental Association and Center for Disease Control recommend that infants not receive water for drinking nor for making their formula. It's 250 times more concentrated in fluoride than mother's milk. We shouldn't fluoridate water and harm our most vulnerable. The next thing I looked at was dental fluorosis. These are the white and brown spots on the teeth. The only thing that causes dental fluorosis is fluoride. Too much fluoride ingested, usually during the developing years, birth to about 8 years of age. When I see people coming in to have treatment for dental fluorosis, I mention to them that they have had too much fluoride. And this is an indication that the rest of their body has probably had too much fluoride also, their bones and in the rest of their organs. Damage from dental fluorosis is not disputed. Everyone agrees that too much fluoride can cause dental fluorosis. About 1/3 of children are now experiencing fluorosis, according to the CDC. The next thing I wanted to look at was benefits. What are the benefits of it? I've heard reports of 20 to 40%, 60%, 80% tooth reduction with water fluoridation. So what is the benefit of water fluoridation? And I had a close look at several factors. One, comparing different countries of the world, we can see that no matter what we do on fluoridation, whether the country fluoridates or no fluoride at all, decay is reduced the same amount in all countries. We can compare states in the United States. And we can see on a graph that as they're plotted in order of increased amount of fluoridation in the state, fluoridation doesn't make any difference. We have the same amount of good health in the states regardless of their fluoridation. Same thing for counties and other locations. That was disturbing to me. If there's no benefit, well, why are we fluoridating? I have 2 requests for you. One is to talk to your dentist and your healthcare provider about fluoridation. Ask them if they've seen the National Academy of Science report on fluoridation. Give them information that they may not have on water fluoridation and excess fluoride exposure. That helped me when my patients casually, calmly, quietly said, have a look at this. This doctor, this dentist is concerned about water fluoridation. What do you think? None of us professionals want to harm our patients. Our whole lives are given to improving the health of people, not harming them. And so for those of you who are healthcare professionals, I highly urge you to look once again at the science on fluoridation. Science doesn't need to be scary. It's just information. Spend a little bit of time looking at it on both sides of the issues. Don't just look at one side filtered. Look at both sides and weigh it for yourself. The other thing is to sign an online petition with me at fluoridealert.org. The online petition requests Congress to have hearings on fluoridation. It also recommends that we no longer fluoridate our water. Thank you.